Welcome to 2026, where Arizona is number one in basketball and Arizona football can win double-digit games. Life is good. Let's go win the Holiday Bowl, baby.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade. And I'm excited to talk Arizona football with you today. Usually a lot of hoops. Today is a big day in the world of the gridiron. We'll touch on a lot. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And today on the show, I'll preview Arizona against SMU in the Holiday Bowl with some in-depth detail. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Let's set the scene. Arizona began 1-3 in conference play with a tantalizing loss to BYU and then another tantalizing loss to Houston, back-to-back. And then there's a bye. And let's go down that rabbit hole really quickly. If Arizona had won those games, where they held leads, like it's not like, oh, if they just won those games. No, like there was leads, there was feasible ways to win those games. And if this team could be in the playoff with one of those wins, two for sure. And instead, somehow with those losses, as they were, just as the season happened, the way the cards fell, I actually think the culture and proof of internal belief is stronger than having recovered than if those things, the adversity had not transpired. If Arizona had won those games and cruised through, I think there's a world in which Brent Brennan's gone. And I think there's a world in which the staff of the coordinators are gone. Instead, we had this situation where I polled you guys, and myself included, thought that 7 wins was just about the maximum outcome before a bowl game. So 8 wins total. And since that poll onward, Arizona has not lost. Hammering Colorado, which we expected. Eked out a win against Kansas with a clutch finish. Then went on the road and beat Cincinnati, which at that point was a prime candidate to win the Big 12. And they beat Cincinnati on the road. Solidified that this team is for real and Brent Brennan should stick around. That's what kind of was the like, oh yeah, he's here. And then they blasted Baylor and Arizona State. And I guess the Arizona State one, there was a bit of a struggle. But in a rivalry game, winning by 16, I'd call that a emphatic win. And as that happened, belief grew. And as the season went along, Arizona became a team that I think is positioned well, not just for this year, but going forward in the Big 12. And Arizona has since retained staff and momentum on the recruiting trail. So that's where we are now. They're 17th in the college football poll, and they face the SMU Mustangs 1 year removed from the SMU Mustangs making the college football playoff. But they had a tumultuous season with their circuitous path taken to reach an 8-4 final total at this point, with big wins over name brands and some poor losses. Speaking of SMU, here's an excerpt that I found that I think appropriately summarized their season and gives thoughts to Arizona fans of their opponent and who they are and what the identity is. Steve Helwick said, anytime you go from 11 wins with a college football playoff experience to 8 or 9 without one, it's certainly a step backward. But SMU was excruciatingly close to another playoff appearance until a last-minute Cal touchdown in the regular season finale derailed its ACC championship game hopes. This was a quality team. And it's shown in the fact that in the Miami game, the Mustangs were on par with anybody in the ACC. He continued to say this, but SMU had a few glaring flaws, most notably the passing defense, which fell from 79th to 135th in yards allowed per game. We'll touch on that later. Also, 3 of the 4 losses could be attributed to kicking woes, considering SMU missed game-winning and game-tying field goals against Baylor, an extra point and a 1-point loss to Wake Forest, and a game-tying field goal at Cal. However, the Mustangs' passing game and defensive front were elite qualities that allowed this team to be in the hunt for the college football playoff until late November. So that's a really interesting summation, right? It's a team that had possibilities of repeating trips to the college football playoff, and anything can happen from there. That means they had a chance to win the ACC, which I don't think is as good as it has been. Like Florida State and Clemson, the 2 marquee names, are down. Miami, of course, a historically important tournament, not tournament, a team and program, and they are in the big dance of college football. Miami made it, and they eked out that spot from Notre Dame without having participated in the ACC title game, which was Virginia against Duke. And the better teams sat out because they struggled and had unfortunate losses. SMU was among those teams. So that's interesting to me. And I think it's particularly interesting because just a few bounces another direction for both Arizona and SMU, the unranked opponent for SMU becomes a team that is on the precipice of the college football playoff or a team that's in it. And instead, Arizona is seen as a solid, I'm not going to say a solid favorite by like betting odds, but just like the perception is Arizona's been the better team at 9-3 all season. Whereas I think if you start this season, you'd say SMU had the better chance of making the college football playoff. SMU was the better team for much of the year. And then Arizona finished hot, and SMU had a few rough bounces. And that altered the trajectory of their season. And Arizona had those rough bounces early, which changed the trajectory of their season. They were lucky enough to recover and steer straight and find their way through that difficult channel. And that was super impressive. I expect an awesome game because I think these teams are very similar. And I think there's so much similarity between the way that these teams play. We've talked about it in brief previews before. They both have very good quarterbacks, Noah Fafita and Kevin Jennings. And then you look at what they do well. They both pass the ball well, and their motto, not their motto, their MO, their modus operandi is that they make the other team turn the ball over, and they have plus margins for turnovers at among the very elite. Arizona as a plus 16, SMU with a plus 11 among the very, very elite. Good quarterback play. Similar statistics there. Both teams have solid running games in the sense of like they have good runners, but wouldn't be statistically borne out to say, wow, that team can really run. And then the defense is better when defending different aspects of the game. However, it's interesting because Arizona is better at defending the pass, and this is a team that passes very well, but finished the year running very well. And SMU is better at defending the run, but Arizona passes a little better than they run. So there's a lot of little subtle nuances. And the one other thing that's interesting is Arizona is a pretty good offensive team. Where they have struggled is the red zone. Where is SMU very, very good? The red zone. So there's a lot of little cross matches that we'll analyze and give you, of course, the key. So coming up next, I'm going to say I expect an awesome game. So who knows what happens. But before we get into the nitty-gritty on the matchups and keys to who wins and how Arizona can exploit SMU's weaknesses, here are two important things to know. Vegas says Arizona are 2-point favorites with an over-under of 52.5 with an implied score then of Arizona 27 and SMU 25, which adds to 52. And then there's some eerie similarities between these two teams. Offensive points per game, Arizona 33 and SMU 33. SMU like a fraction, 0.3 points more per game. Defensive points per game surrendered, 18.9 for Arizona and SMU 20.7, both very close. Turnovers allowed, Arizona that they committed, I think, is 12 and SMU 16. Arizona forced 28 turnovers and SMU forced 27. So those teams are very similar on paper in the four most important categories in football. So coming up next, we're going to go through the key matchups, where this one will be decided on the turf as opposed to just discussing it, as well as lay out Arizona's keys to victory, plus, of course, predictions. I got to make that one final prediction. So that's all coming up next on Locked On Wildcats. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. So player props update as guys heat up after a couple catches. You can say, oh, yeah, that guy's having a monster game. I'm going to bet right now. And if FanDuel will adjust those odds as it happens. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. You already live your team every day, so now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Wildcats with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonwildcats.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Leif Thulin with you here. And I showed you right before the break how statistically similar these teams are in both points per game allowed, scored by them, conceded, turnovers, forced, and conceded. But these teams are very similar in the way that the game says, oh, how many did you score? How good are you on defense? Like all that type of stuff. These teams are very statistically similar, but the narrative about these teams is a little different. So now, where are the matchups that decide this game on the actual gridiron? So let's start with SMU. Familiarize you guys with the Mustangs, and we'll start SMU on offense and Arizona on defense. SMU largely ditched the run this year in favor of the pass, and the offense relies heavily on quarterback Kevin Jennings and the receiving core. But even with that lack of, the 1-2 punch and the multidimensionality, the only team that really stopped SMU's passing attack this year was Wake Forest in what was a 13-12 slugfest. Arizona is a top-tier team in terms of fewest passing yards allowed. They're top 5. I was scrambling for it. They're top 5 in fewest passing yards allowed and opponent completion percentage. So basically, they're great at defending the pass, and SMU is very good at passing the ball. So I expect SMU to be a little less efficient than usual. But I still think that the passing that they have built with their offensive genius, Lashley at the helm, probably is able to inflate the numbers that Arizona is used to conceding. And assuming Arizona's all Big 12 defensive backs suit up for the Holiday Bowl, which they will, the Wildcats should provide quite a challenge to that defense that's been so stout, especially at the end of the year. And in researching this game, I was deciding who should guard whom, and styles and things like that. You'll never know exactly what happens, but that's the way my brain works. And I was trying to think of who would have the advantage where. But I thought this summed it up nicely. This is again from the SMU expert Helwick, who I referred to earlier. He said Jordan Hudson, and that's a guy I've mentioned to you guys before, but he said Jordan Hudson will be Jennings' top target. But SMU's receiving core has been incredibly balanced in the last 3 seasons. Hudson is a do-everything receiver. Romello Brinson shines on the deep routes, and Ymir Knight is a more reliable short yardage threat. Also, the tight ends, RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner, create a formidable duo. So that's 5 players that you really got to watch out for. And the stats bear this out too. And both excel, the tight ends, this is, at contested catches and can be dangerous on the seam. Thus, Arizona's elite defensive backs will be put to work given the sheer depth of the receiving room, so you can't focus on one guy. And Arizona's done really well against teams who try to throw it as their main source of offense. And if you go back to Arizona's losses, which feel like distant pasts ago, the answer is they couldn't get off the field on 3rd down and they couldn't stop the run. And Houston and BYU ran 40-plus times. Recently, teams have been trying to establish the run. Arizona stops it and they say, okay, you're going to have to throw it down in distance and we're going to pick you off. Well, they've righted that ship of not being able to stop the rim and demonstrated this against Arizona State, the most impressively, making Sims throw and giving him eternal nightmares of the Wildcats defensive backs. So the recipe's different against Jennings. And the Mustangs are a balanced team. They have abandoned the run from what it was in years past. They have talented running backs. And Jennings and his comfortability and the scheme for SMU gives me some wariness, despite the great success all season against the pass, only allowing 156 yards in conference play through the air. 156. That is 5th in all of college football in yards allowed, but it got better in conference play. That's so hard to do. Now, the focus will be taking away the pass. SMU knows it. Arizona knows it. So what does SMU do on the ground? That's the next question. The Mustangs ranked 125th nationally in attempts, yet 65th in rushing average at a respectable 4.4 yards per tote. SMU's rushing numbers would be higher, in my opinion, if Jennings didn't battle an ankle injury from week 2 onward. And Jennings was a pretty good runner last year. And I think that this month of recovery time makes me a little wary about what he can do and kind of give new looks to this team. And I think Gonzalez, the defensive coordinator, will have to be privy to that. And his rushing total fell from last season, 354 yards, to just 50. I think he could be someone who is a little bit of a game breaker there. However, the run game is spearheaded by the running backs TJ Harden and Chris Johnson Jr. And SMU's last 3 outings, this is dangerous for Arizona. In researching, you say, okay, how many yards per game on the run? Not a ton, but the last 3 games featured 130 and 90-yard explosions from Harden and an 128-yard contribution from Johnson. Like, that's good balance and good explosivity. The Mustangs ran the ball more during that last quarter of the regular season, and it does scare me a little bit in terms of the balance being closer to what you'd expect from a very good team. Put simply, SMU needs the run game to open up their passing attack against this vaunted Arizona defense. That's what they'll look for. Now let's flip the script. Fifita, you guys know how I feel about him. Noah Fifita is fantastic. I think he's the best quarterback in the conference, and I think he's a big-time, big-game player. He's a prime-time performer, as Dickie V would say in college basketball. And Fifita plays a vulnerable pass defense, but a defense that is full of ball hawks. The 27 takeaways on the year are very, very good. 5th in the FBS, and they do a great job of offsetting SMU's ranking as the 135th best passing defense. And that's not very good at all. So make of that what you will. If Fifita, plays steady and he doesn't turn it over, he could dice this team up. However, this team will pin its ears back and try to make him make mistakes. That's no crazy new recipe. So, of course, the key will be win the turnover battle. And Fifita plays a role that Fifita is very good at. He's best when there's a complementary attack on the ground. And SMU does a good job on the ground defensively. Like, that's what they do. They're very good at defending the run because they're not particularly great through the air. However, they force down and distance when they stop the run, and they get interceptions. And Arizona needs to get some juice out of their stable of backs. A few big runs to establish the threat of the run early could be crucial, absolutely pivotal in this game. Quincy Craig and Mahdi, like, those are guys that, we've always talked about, like, you want to have balance, right? But you need it today. You need it, I guess, tomorrow when you guys hear this. And both have big play capacity. And both average over 6 yards per carry this season, speaking of Craig and Mahdi. And I want to see them be productive early and often to help protect SMU from pinning their ears back and really causing havoc going after Fifita. I think Arizona will look to throw early, actually, which is kind of what SMU expects, but it's not something most teams do. Usually it's the run to establish the throw. Maybe that's antiquated, but I think a lot of teams still try to do that. And then I kind of think that the run game will have to be see, we can do this too. And hopefully Arizona punishes a defense that's geared to stop the pass, and they can punish them with the triumvirate of Mahdi, Craig, and Riscano. I expect Fifita to win the battle with Jennings, marginally. Like, I think they're both very good quarterbacks. I think Fifita wins that battle. And when I say that, I'm not saying statistically beats him. I think Fifita just has a more efficient day. And the run games will be the ultimate decider. Coming up next, I'm going to give you the keys to an Arizona victory, which would mean a 10-win season in the second year under Brent Brennan. And boy, is that hard to accomplish. Let's talk about that and a lot more coming up next on Locked On Wildcats. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with the long queues, the logins, and prices jumping out at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use, and I went from browsing to buying in just mere minutes. I love being able to see, this is me. I'm a college basketball guy. I'm a college football guy. I love tennis. I've used it for all of the above. I love seeing exactly what I'll see from my seat before buying. So I knew exactly what I was getting when I went to watch the U.S. Open. I didn't want a pole in front of me. I didn't want a staircase in front of me to obscure my view. Make sure you do the same, and Game Time makes that easy. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Here are my keys to an Arizona victory with correlating stats, because you know me, I like stats. The first key is an easy one. Win the turnover battle. Arizona leads the nation in turnover margin. They are often winning the turnover battle. But SMU, like I said, is no slouch in that department. They have a plus 11, forcing 27 turnovers, conceding 16. So you got to win the turnover battle against a team that has conceded just forced one fewer turnover than you. Win the turnover battle. And I think getting up early in the game, making a team play from behind usually is the recipe for that. The next one will be dominate field position. Arizona is elite in net field position. Meanwhile, SMU struggles in that. And so capitalize on this and make SMU's offense drive long distances and make that SMU offense that is heavily reliant on throwing have to make a lot of big time throws against these ball hawks and not just dink and dump. And so here's the next one. These work hand in hand. It's control the clock. It works with field position. It works in other things. Yeah, I grew up watching Stanford football, starting with Andrew Luck, then Kevin Hogan, and those teams were elite at controlling the clock, and they'd run out teams with the run game. Arizona doesn't do it in that same facet, but I'm uniquely appreciative of the value of field position and controlling the clock and how they work in tandem. Often Stanford would punt from their the 40, and you'd be like, man, it's 4th and 1. You've been running all over them all day. But you make the other team go 99 yards, they're going to give you good field position, and you convert and score, and you constantly make the other team earn every yard and every point they score. Very, very difficult to beat a team that does that. Arizona's time of possession is 31 minutes, and that's a lot better than SMU's 26, or about 27 when you round up. So keep the ball out of SMU's hands, make them have long drives to score, or have really short drives by forcing 3 and outs. So, and I think that'll have a lot to do with who can stop the other team's run game better, actually. Even though both teams are better at passing than running, I think the control of the clock is who can establish the run game better, or contrarily, who is better at stopping the opposing team's run game, which is going to be the counter to a very, very good pass defense for Arizona. So the next thing would be, speaking of that pass defense for Arizona, let's talk about the pass offense. Use the explosivity of the field, like big play Trey. I want to see him involved early and often. You've had a lot of time to draw up plays, a lot of time. SMU is really strong in terms of their run defense. Arizona's passing attack is efficient. So look to exploit mismatches on the outside and try to test what I would call an iffy secondary, a secondary that is prone to gambling. They make a lot of big plays, but they also make mistakes, yielding 135th in terms of passing defense. That's not particularly good for an ACC team that was thinking about the playoff. And they'll be thinking, okay, we got to stop the Fafita quick game. Fafita can take advantage and throw a long ball. He's very good at the quick game and try to get some big plays and kind of put a shock to the system at SMU. I want to see a couple big plays early in this game, drawn up, pre-scripted, because everyone's got their games, first 10, first 15. But you've had a month to draw these up, and you've seen the defense. Take a few shots. Make them earn their keep. The next one is the opposite. Contain Kevin Jennings. Jennings, to me, and Fafita are not terribly dissimilar. I trust Fafita more, but I'll readily admit it's because I've watched him more. I think Jennings is a dual threat quarterback that's been hampered, and if he's got his health back, watch out. So limit his big plays, both through the air and through extended plays. Not necessarily on the ground, but when he extends plays. And force him into difficult situations, down and distance, of course. Stop the run on early downs, but in this team, they're going to throw a lot. So, try to bring some pressure, vary the blitz packages, vary the timing of the blitzes. And I think Jennings is pretty darn good. And I think his legs could be a factor more than his health allowed him to be during the season. So watch out for, a couple scrambles as well as design runs for Jennings. And this is one of the better quarterbacks that Arizona's faced. But this is a team that held Sawyer Robertson, who's second in yards, I want to say, to under 200. So I have faith in the Arizona pass defense. But I do think this game is going to be determined by the complementary nature of football as opposed to just which quarterback's better than the other. The other thing is you got to keep Fafita upright with a formidable and aggressive pass rush that is very pleased to get into games where they can pin their ears back and attack. I think Fafita's got to be quick in those. So those big plays I'm talking about, I want to see be early as opposed to, it's 3rd and 8, we got to go send it deep. I want to see those on early downs. And the last thing is always an important one for Arizona because they haven't been particularly great in the red zone. SMU's red zone defense is fantastic, and Arizona's red zone offense needs to be efficient. You need to convert points into 6, not 3, and that'll be a key, any football game you watch, but particularly when one team is very bend, don't break, and they're pretty pleased to play defense and their best defense within the 20-yard lines. Got to turn those points into touchdowns, those drives into touchdowns, and 6 points rather than 3. So here, with all that said, those are my keys. Here is how I see the game unfolding. And I've been doing a lot of contemplating about this. I think Arizona and SMU both score pretty often in the first half by virtue of their very good quarterbacks. I actually expect neither of these turnover-forcing teams to get many takeaways. I don't think that's the way this game plays. I see a high-scoring first half, something like 31 points between the two. Let's say 17-14. And the two sides being very similar in their construction of their offense. A little more throwing than running, but decent success in both. And I think the throwing game is kind of what enables both teams to score. It's the conduit to success, but there's enough balance that's difficult to stop. But SMU, if you look at what they've done this year, they have not thrived in shootout-style games. They're 0-3 when allowing north of 24 points. So this bodes well for Arizona, in my opinion, because I don't think Arizona's going to give up a ton, but I do think they exceed 24 points, especially with that start I told you about. So I think the second half follows a similar script, but it goes the way of the Wildcats more because their superior pass defense takes away what Jennings and SMU do best, which is pass the ball. And so the Mustangs can contain Fafita okay, but I think that there's more of a natural balance and there's not going to be this like concerted effort of like, oh, we need to run, which is I think that what's going to happen for SMU to keep Arizona from pitting their ears back and blitzing the quarterback and forcing turnovers, the 28 they've forced. So what I think happens is Fafita and the ground, the running backs, the stable of Mahdi, Craig, Riscano, all those guys are more balanced than what SMU can do. And I think that balance leads to more sustainable drives taking longer. And I think the field position and clock advantage will go to Arizona in the second half. So that's the way I see it. And accordingly, I've got Arizona winning this game. I've got Fafita winning MVP of the game behind about 270 yards passing. And I expect an Arizona to a 10-win season for the second time in 3 years, the first under Brent Brennan. And I have Arizona kind of leading in the second half, building a lead because they're a little more sustainable, and then Jennings throwing one back-breaking interception, and I'm going to call it. I'm going to say Traden Stukes picks one off and seals his deal, signs off as a Wildcat great with a big pick to seal this game. I got Fafita with 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, with one on the ground from I'm going to go with Mahdi off the ground, 3 touchdowns through the air from Fafita. I got Jennings getting 3 touchdowns as well. I got 2 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground from Jennings, and then 2 interceptions, 1 late. That's the backbreaker from Kevin Jennings, and they just can't keep up the Wildcats. Final score, 31-27. Arizona wins the Sun Bowl, or excuse me, the Holiday Bowl. Arizona State loses the Sun Bowl is my next note. I've got them losing the Sun Bowl. I think there's too much chaos there, and Arizona fans can take solace in winning their game and Arizona State losing theirs in the Sun Bowl. So I got Arizona winning the Holiday Bowl, Arizona State losing in the Holiday Bowl. Let me know your thoughts. Happy New Year's to you guys. I hope that brightens your 2026 when you listen to this. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Thanks as always for tuning in to Locked On Wildcats. And tomorrow I'll have a preview of the Big 12 opener against the Utah Utes, as well as a little more on the football when I watch this game and get you guys excited for both, because Arizona athletics are trending upward in the Big 12. So make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Wildcats so you get all the latest episodes. Follow me on Twitter at Leif Thulin. Interact with me there. Send me your questions if you have any, or score predictions. And of course, comment your score predictions on the comments below on YouTube. And if Locked On Wildcats made your Spotify Wrapped, prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our National Locked On Podcast Network account and social, and do it on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code so you can be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive on the All Access to the members-only Discord channel. So for those of you who are listening on YouTube, we'll send you a 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On College Football, where you may find a preview of this one as well. Thanks for tuning in, as always, and bear down.